everyone, and welcome back to another episode of PrepTalk podcast. I'm your host, Vartika Bhandari. To start off this episode, I would like to say that we have done a lot of videos on how important standardized tests are in your college application. But today, we are going to talk about everything that hardship boils down to your college application. Yes, to start off this episode, we have with us Abhinav Nath from Nextrack Consulting, who has helped many students in the process of their college application and help them land in the finest institutes around the globe. So, if you're interested in building a very good college application, I suggest you keep on listening to this podcast. And without further ado, let's get started. Hi, Abhinav. Welcome to the Prep Talk podcast. How are you?
Hi, Vartika. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you here. So first off, I would like you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Perfect. Sounds good. Hey guys, my name is Abhinav. I have actually been in the counseling space for about 7 years now. And Nextrack is an organization that I founded, started about 3.5, 4 years ago. And prior to that, I was working somewhere else. Right after graduation, I've been in the counseling field, helping lots and lots of students from India and a little bit from, Southeast Asia as well. And managed to help more than 150 or so students, 150 to 200 now, I'd say, in the last 7 years. And at Nextrack alone, we've helped more than 100 students now. And I myself was an undergrad student in the US as well, so sort of had that experience and now trying to guide students in the best way possible.
Perfect. So let's divert a conversation towards college application, which is actual topic of our podcast today. So why is it important for a student to care about college application that much?
Sure. At the end of the day, when it comes to applications, and regardless of whichever country you're applying to, the admission officers in today's day and age receive so many applications. In some cases, it's thousands. In some cases, it's 50,000 plus.
Yeah.
And now with certain colleges like UCLA, NYU, they get applications of more than 1 lakh students. So it's really important to kind of make sure your application is the one that's doing all the talking.
Hmm.
And especially if you look at the US, the application process is what they call holistic admissions, which means it's not only about your academics. There's a lot of other pieces that come into play as well. So making sure all those aspects of your application, whether that's the essay, whether that's the activities, the extracurricular section, or if you're reporting any academic honors, students really need to know, how to kind of manage to report those in the correct manner. And the interesting thing is, applications across countries also are very different. So if you're applying to the UK, the personal statement is very different to the Common App essay in the US. You're talking about very different things in those two things. So just understanding for which country you're applying, what sort of colleges you're applying, and what kind of goes into the application is important, because that is what the admission officers are looking at. And at some universities, they may only glance over your application for just 30 seconds to a minute. And sometimes when they find applications interesting, they want to go deeper, they can spend, as much as 20, 30 minutes on an applicant as well. So that's the main thing. That's what has to speak to an admission officer when you're applying. So of course becomes one of the most important aspects of your admissions process.
All right. So we'll take it step by step, highlighting all the profiling things that we have and all the elements that goes into a good profile. So we'll talk about extracurricular activities. So how does it have an impact, and how much of percentage does it goes in terms of showing off the extracurricular awareness of a student, and does it matter if a student is not into extracurriculars but has a strong academic as compared to a student who has a good academics as well as extracurricular, he has good
Yeah,
inclination towards that.
yeah. No, great question. I think One thing that I want to start with is that we talk about profile and we talk about portfolio building and all these
Yeah.
terminologies that we use in the education space. It's important to note that it's not needed for every country.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when it comes to the UK, the profiling looks very different to what it is for the US. And now for a lot of the Indian liberal arts colleges as well, if you're applying to schools like Ashoka, Kriya, they also ask for your activities and extracurriculars. So in a lot of countries that does come into play, and in a lot of countries it's not something that is looked at, and it is more on your academics. Let me perhaps start with the US, and then I can touch on UK and a couple other countries as well.
Mm-hmm.
So US is the place where if a student comes to us and says, we're looking at the US, profile building is the biggest component in the US for the US, purely because, like I mentioned, they use a terminology called holistic admissions, which means we're going to look at your academics, we're going to look at your extracurriculars and activities. And when they say extracurricular activities, what they're really saying is that it's not like you have to do a certain thing to meet their criteria. What they really want to understand is that in your high school years, which is grade 9 to grade 12, how have you spent your time outside of academics,
Mm-hmm.
and what have you done in that time? So at times we look at extracurriculars from a lens of, I need to do something really big and only then does it make a difference. But the interesting part is, when you go into the Common App, you'll actually see some of the sort of items that are given in the activities section, or whether or not you have any household responsibilities, whether or not you have religious practices. So we actually had a student in the past, and today he's at Princeton. He had actually mentioned a household activity, a chore that he used to do in his house, and that was one of his 10 activities. Similarly, another student who is at Wesleyan today, which is a top liberal arts school, similarly had written another household activity that he was a part of. He would help his parents in certain chores on the weekends. So the college admissions is trying to see how have you spent your time, and that is where the activities section kind of comes into play as well. Now, apart from that, they also look at essays, they look at LORs, and there are lots of other things that the US also kind of focuses on, which is how rigorous has your curriculum been. So if you're looking at the top 10, top 20, 30 schools in the US, they will look at the fact that, have you challenged yourself academically, have you taken rigorous courses, and that can also come into play. And of course, standardized testing is a big component of it as well. So it's hard to kind of say and pinpoint that this is this much percentage or that is that much percentage. But what I will say overall is that the academics is the foundation of your application. That is the backbone. Uh, every now and then you might see some exceptions being made that a student was not in the top tier academically, but they got into a fantastic school. And that is when you know that the other part of the application was so strong, or the admission saw something there which really appealed to them, and that's when they decided to take that student. But in majority of the cases, and the norm you'll see is that if you're looking at, let's say, Ivy League schools, for example, they will be looking at the topmost academic students first. So that becomes the backbone of your application. Now, in addition to that, they do want to see extracurriculars, activities. How have you spent your time? What types of activities can a student do, though? It really varies. You can, you'll hear about social work, you'll hear about starting your own project, you'll hear about research, leadership opportunities that exist in your own school, sports, music. The list just goes on.
Right.
They just want to see what is it that you're interested in and how have you made the most out of that opportunity as well. So we will always encourage students to kind of think around areas that they are interested in. That could be an academic area, that could be a passion, a hobby, and we try and see how can we build activities around that as well. But that component becomes quite important in a US process. Now, let's say there is a student who is all academic, but they don't really have a lot outside of that. Uh, does that mean you can't go to a US college and you can't get a good admission? No, absolutely not. colleges will still value you for who you are. However, they will look at that component as well and wonder that, what is it that you did outside of that academic piece? Uh,
Mhm.
because when you're being compared to other students in an application pool, the comparison makes the difference. So if a
Right.
student is an IB today and a
Mhm.
certain student is getting a score, an X score, the other student is also getting that, but that other student has also done 10 other very good things, they might, opt for them. So there are those components that come in, and you have to remember your applications are being compared to each other.
Mhm.
So academics alone for the US sometimes does not cut it. But that's not to say that every college will want, heavy extracurriculars and stuff.
Mhm.
We have had students in the past. I'm being very conscious of the fact that, a lot of students who listen to these things and they want this information, you know, some students sometimes are struggling academically, and that's a reality as well. So
Mhm.
we at times deal with students who are not able to do academically well, and we are actually the first ones who will tell them, listen, let's take it a little lightly on the extracurriculars. You don't have to kill yourself doing that just because you're thinking US colleges want that.
Mhm.
You can kind of design how you want to do your activities, how you want to spend that time. For a student today who is not able to cope academically, I would always say first focus on that. And
Mhm.
then, let's say in your summer break, let's say in your winter break, we can find ways on what are some of the things that you can indulge in and add to your profile, so to say. But if that academic component is not sorted out first, I would not advise a student to go and spend a lot of time doing extracurriculars as well. So you have to be very mindful in terms of who are you talking to, which is the student. That makes a difference. And on the other hand, if you look at the UK, uh, and if you tell them you've done social work, that doesn't really come into play
Mhm.
unless you can explain that in your personal statement that I volunteered somewhere and it gave me some of the skills that
Mhm.
are needed for my academic course that I'm applying for.
Right.
So the UK personal statement becomes about, if I'm applying for business management today, why am I a fit for it?
Mhm.
How have I prepared myself for business management? So
Mhm.
I would rather read about, business books. I would pick up entrepreneurial books and things like that, and indulge in those sort of things. You can do research if you want, but the idea is try and keep it to the field of study that you're looking at. So even depending on each country of choice, it does make a difference. And like I said, each student is different. Everybody should not be doing so much extracurricular profile building, and sometimes that
Mhm.
pressure gets created can be a lot as well. But very important to kind of ask yourself and ask your counselor what is needed for you exactly.
Mhm. So, is it right to say that extracurriculars are more inclined towards the personality and the traits that the student have and build on that instead of them taking on to activities which are, not not suitable for them in the sense that they might not be in towards working
Yeah.
towards like that particular thing. So let's say if we talk about sports, let's say a student is very good in dance, and just to add on to the extracurriculars, they take on a sport that they're not very good at. They cannot um somewhat not good at par
Yeah.
or at par with the best in that criteria. So, is it
Right.
right to say that it is uh, more towards the personality of the student?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think you have to kind of pull out those conversations as a counselor. That becomes one of our jobs as well, that,
Mhm.
you need to initiate conversations to understand the student on
Mhm.
what their interests are. Because, let's be real, we're dealing with grade 8, grade 9, grade 10 students. They don't know
Mhm.
what they're interested in.
Right.
You have to make them do self-reflection. You have to kind of
Mhm.
ask them questions so they actually understand themselves better, that okay, yes, this is, a cause that I care about perhaps. And
Mhm.
now that I know I care about poverty, let's say,
Mhm.
now I can start to go and do something about that. Another student may not care about poverty, but they may care about animals and, animal. So another activity for them would
Mhm.
revolve around that. So
Mhm.
definitely building on their interest would be important. But I think initially pulling out what those interests are is
Mhm.
really important as well. And I think I'll also just suggest that certain situations are also where I think a student should be pushed and encouraged to try something new, but it shouldn't be that I think I need a sport on my profile, so let me go
Mhm.
play a sport, even though I don't enjoy this.
Right.
I don't think that should be the case. But
Mhm.
if they genuinely want to test themselves, they want to get outside of their comfort zone and say, you know what, I'm not playing a sport, and I
Mhm.
want to push myself to take on a new activity or take on a new challenge. Sure, that would be fine to some degree. I think when we look at profile building, we kind of even think of it in a way that what is it that you kind of care about? What are the
Mhm.
things you enjoy doing? And how can we kind of combine them to a cause that you're kind of standing up for? But the other side of that would be something around their academics as well. So
Mhm.
if we know someone wants to today, let's say, study biology, for example, it'll be nice to see if we can build on certain activities in and around the field of biology. Now,
Right.
that could be internship, that could be
Mhm.
going deeper into a course, that could be a summer course, that could be a research opportunity.
Mhm.
It's not to say that that student has to do research, has to do an internship, but
Mhm.
the idea is get some more exposure in that field, build some skill sets in that field as well, because not only will that help you, for your profile, but it's also exposing you to the field, to the industry before you go in for that major. At times students steer away from a certain topic because they realize if this is what my life will look like after this major, I may not want to do it. And at times it validates their interest, that this is what I thought I like, and
Mhm.
after having tested this, I realized I really love doing this, and I think this is what I want to major in. So the activities that you pick can never hurt you, they can only help you. I always say it's not just about college, but the fact that you're indulging in these kind of things between grade 9 to grade 12, it's also shaping your personality. But I personally am against that thing of, let's say a student comes in today, I will never go and just say you need to do this, this, and this. It's the idea is first understanding the
Mhm.
student, working with them, and then a few weeks into it is when the ideas actually start to flow, that this could be something good for you.
Mhm.
For you.
Okay, so we have seen in past few years that the results that we've received from the students and their admissions, a lot of students have excelled in leadership scores and actually landed the sort of college they were expecting to get into. So one for example, one you were just mentioning about a bio course and
Mm,
doing an internship in that. So we had actually a student who pursued chemistry and is now in Stanford because of the internship and the research work he did. So
Maybe.
talking about leadership, how does that particular element help in the profile building of a student? If you can emphasize on that point a little bit more.
Absolutely. I think leadership is a huge point, and
Mhm.
it's something we always try and encourage our students to think about as well. And when it comes to adding the component of leadership to your profile, there are two aspects to it always. I
Mhm.
call it formal leadership, which will be like a formal title that, let's say, the school has given you. You're the house
Mhm.
captain or you're the school
Mhm.
captain. So
Mhm.
you carry a formal title with you of leadership, which puts a lot of responsibilities and duties on you. And in a lot of ways, to gain those kind of positions in school, you have to be excelling academically, you have to be excelling in certain areas,
Mhm.
which, if you think about it, amongst your own batch, you're already sort of ahead. You're kind of ahead of the rest of the batch, and that is why
Mhm.
you're getting those positions as well. So sometimes, when you look at school captains and head boys and head girls, in a lot of cases they are excelling already, which
Mhm.
of course will make a positive impact on their admission process as well. On the other hand, if you're not getting those positions, that's okay, because
Mhm.
again, everyone can't get it. In a
Right.
batch of 30 students, three, four, five positions may exist like that, but not
Mhm.
more than that.
Mhm.
So everyone can do it. Does that mean everyone can't be a leader?
Mhm.
Absolutely not. Now,
Mhm.
this is where what I'll call informal or a non-formal, whatever you want to call it, leadership title comes in, which is how can you build your own activities
Mhm.
and become a leader in that. So an example that I'll give is that, we've had a couple of students in the last year or two where they've taken their passions like music or dance to non-profit schools and created like a curriculum around that. So
Right.
the example that I'll give is, one of our students last year, what he did is
Hmm.
he used to play the guitar and used to sing. So we kind of brainstormed how can you go into this NGO school that
Hmm.
does not have a music teacher today because they can't afford that luxury,
Hmm.
and start make like a music curriculum for them where you can go in once a week and actually teach them music.
Hmm.
And we basically spoke to the school, figured out 15-20 students who wanted to be a part of that class. Now the student is going every Saturday morning and conducting a music class for that 15 to 20 group of students. And he did that for like 6 months to a year or so.
Right.
Now, the same thing, what you could have done, that same student could have gone to that nonprofit and said, hey, I have some free time on a Saturday morning and I want to do something with the school. How can I volunteer? And let's say they give him some responsibilities that this is what you can do, this is how you can volunteer, and he volunteers.
Hmm.
Is there anything good or bad in both situations? No. If
No.
someone is going to volunteering, that's also a great thing,
Hmm.
not gonna lie. But
Hmm.
how can you put that into a leadership component? That
Hmm.
leadership component becomes in a way that that student created his own curriculum. First, he kind of built, okay, what can 20, 30 classes of music look like? How will I conduct this? How will I run this? And
Hmm.
now you're taking your own project to that school saying, I want to come in and I want to deliver this project that I have already built for you.
Yeah.
That is you can bring in leadership as well. So what
Hmm.
we'll always try and encourage our students to do is that, instead of thinking of it very passively, which is I'll just go there and I'll just do something, let's think how can I take an active initiative and make an impact or make a mark in that. So you're still going to an NGO, but you're going with your own project. Similarly, if you're doing an internship tomorrow, how can you be proactive about that and create your own mini project within that internship? So that is where I think leadership does come in.
Hmm.
I'll also is that with the fact that it's not always for everyone. Whenever we have students who like they sign up with us, in the first few weeks, we actually will show them certain skills and certain traits that are needed for certain activities. So
Hmm.
we'll always tell them that, if you're looking to do your own projects, if you're looking to create something of your own, one thing you have to keep in mind is you have to be very self-driven as well. Because
Right.
while we are here to create ideas and create a path for you, you have to be the one to run it. Now, certain students, they are okay not being that driven at that age, and that is also
Hmm.
okay. And
Hmm.
in those cases, going and volunteering and spending that time doing something valuable is still very good.
Hmm.
So I would always encourage, if a student can think like a leader, it's a must.
That's
But
half
if that
job,
doesn't
half
happen,
done.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't happen, that's okay as well. It's not the end of the world.
Mhm. All right, all right. So you spoke about a lot of things. Okay. So I also wanted to mention that that I think that you're absolutely correct when you said that, because every student's college application has to be personalized in the sense that it has to show what your personality resonates, right? So that that part of having sorting out your curriculars and projects and everything is on the student to
Yeah.
understand and all to uh, gauge that what exactly I can do and what I can continue with. It's not like that you start many things and you don't end it. It is all about where you
Correct.
end at and what high note you leave it at. Right. So with that, in the previous answer that you mentioned that academics are very important and very crucial when we talk about college applications, right? And UK is all about academics, inclined towards academics a lot. So when we talk about the balance that the students fail to maintain in the sense that they have to take care of their extracurriculars and then the projects that they're doing in order to look and stand out better in the applications, and then they have academics that they cannot let go of. So what do you suggest the students do in order to maintain that balance and have everything at check?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the toughest part of that journey, right? Because
Yeah.
maintaining that balance and making sure your academics don't slip along the way is also a very crucial part, and something that every student, of course, has to be mindful of. I think, one thing that I'll say, and you'll hear college counselors say this a lot, that start the process early. And,
Hmm.
we're not just saying start the process early because we just want you to sign up in grade 9 or
Hmm.
something. Uh, it's genuinely to kind of space out things a
Right.
little bit as well. Because if
Right.
you can start in grade 9, and now let's say you worked with a counselor for a year, you've built some skills, you've done some introduction courses, you've got some exposure through certain activities. Let's say by grade 10 you've created your own project. By the time you're applying to college, that project you've done for the last 2.5 years. And here's the beauty about it:
Hmm.
it's okay if you're not putting in 3 hours a day every single day for the last 3 years. If you've done 2 months of very intense work, but then 1 month, 1.5 month, very limited work happened in that project because you had exams, no
Hmm.
problem. You don't need to tell anybody that, because when you look back at your 2.5 year journey in grade
Hmm.
12, when you're applying, you don't remember months that, oh, in that June, I had exams and I did not do anything on that project. But in
Right.
July and August, I spent a lot of time. You will just remember that 2.5 year journey, and where that started and where is that ending. And in some cases, it'll continue for a lot of students.
Hmm.
So starting early gives you a lot of time and space to kind of chart out time for a lot of different things that you can do. uh, Certain activities, I would say couple of activities could be very long term activities that could go on for a year, 2 years, and those are like your personal projects if you want them. Versus other activities could be, 2 weeks long, they could be 3 months long, they could be 4 months long. So you have more phases. If you're starting this in grade 9 or maximum by grade 10, you have 3 summer vacations now to do something. You
Hmm.
have 3 winter vacations now to do something.
Hmm.
Versus when you come to grade 11, you may only have 1 or 2 summer vacations, 1 winter break. And that makes a huge difference, because suddenly you're feeling the pressure that, I want to do a lot and I have to do a lot, but I have to balance that with academics. So the biggest piece that I'll say: nobody can do everything all at the same intensity all the time. It
Hmm.
has to be a give and take, where you're going through an exam period or you're going through a prep exam period. You might want to ease it off on the extracurriculars at that time, and
Hmm.
you might want to take the intensity up once that period is over.
Hmm.
Same thing happened, with standardized testing, that if
Hmm.
you can take it at the start of grade 11 and it's finished in the first term by December or
Hmm.
so, it's out of the way for you, and now you can
Okay.
focus on so many other things. So
Hmm.
I think planning does become a huge part of this, and if you can structure out it in a long-term manner, it really does help a lot. But otherwise, take some guidance, ask your counselor on what is important in which phase.
Hmm.
We always tell our students that, look, if it's getting too much, you have to be honest with us. You have to tell us what's what. At the same time, I will also say, if you are somebody who is literally aiming for the topmost colleges today, then you also have to accept the reality at some level that there is a lot of work that goes into it. It's not
Right.
supposed to be easy. It's not supposed to be for everyone. So if
Hmm.
you're finding yourself putting in a lot of work, it is required, because the application pool is extremely competitive as well.
Right.
But I'd say starting early makes a huge difference, because it just gives you 3-4 years to kind of build on that experience.
Hmm. Right. Okay. So the next element that comes into picture is the standardized test and what we do at Tutela. And yeah, to add on to the question to the answer that you mentioned earlier, that students should start early. It's actually very right.
Yeah.
The standardized test also takes around 4 to 5 months for students if they are going for SAT or ACT.
Right.
And then if they're going for APs, that's another 3 to 4 months added to that counter. So starting right makes all the more sense that you can cover most of the bases, and not
Yeah.
starting at a later time and then thinking, okay, I could have done this as well. And it's just taking the right amount of things that you can put in your kitty. So, talking about standardized test, what do you think about SAT and ACT? And we saw during COVID that many colleges went test blind and a lot of went test optional. So, what is your point of view on that? And what do you suggest the students do when it comes to choosing between SAT and ACT and going ahead with a standardized test?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting now. The test prep landscape has really changed after COVID, I think, and
Yeah.
you would have seen that better than I have.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely see more students do, test optional as well, and they
Mm-hmm.
use advantage of policy. But someone comes to me in grade 10 or starting of grade 11, I will always encourage them to look at SAT or ACT.
Mm-hmm.
Which one? Honestly, we would leave it to Tutela.
Yeah.
We would kind of them that look do the diagnostic, and then they are
Yeah.
the experts on whether SAT is a better format for you or ACT.
Mm-hmm.
Both are equally acceptable, so there's no problem there.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to whether a student should do it or not, especially because now a lot of students kind of come up with this question that, oh, I saw that it's test optional now, these colleges don't need it, so I can just kind of avoid it and not do it anymore. While that's true, it's also important to kind of understand how it sort of plays out. I
Mm-hmm.
think when we interact with admission officers, there are certain set of universities where we have seen that the the class that is being admitted to the college, about 50% of them are going test optional and about 50% of them are applying with a test score. Uh, on the other hand, though, there are certain colleges, some Ivy Leagues, are a part of this as well, where if you actually look at the admitted class and you then see what percentage of the admitted class applied test optional, that number for most of them is less than 20%. So in a lot of the top tier schools, 80% or more students who got admitted did submit their SAT or ACT score, versus with a lot of other schools, the ratio is 50-50, so you can take advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But someone who's at that stage, grade 10, grade 11, I will always say take the SAT or take the ACT,
Mm-hmm.
because then you can always decide whether you want to submit your score or not. So today we have so many students who will submit their score for certain colleges and go test optional for other colleges. Because the nicest thing about US colleges is they release the statistics every year where they kind of tell you what that 25th percentile is, 50th percentile is,
Mm-hmm.
75th percentile is.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone kind of watching this, if today a college has 75th percentile for them is 1500, and
Mm-hmm.
let's say 25th percentile is a 1380, 1430 or something is like, let's say, your 50th percentile. Now you go take the SAT and you got a 1470. You're somewhere between that 50th and 75th percentile. You are in an advantageous position to submit that SAT score to that college.
Right.
Versus, let's say, another college where the 25th percentile is a 1460. I
Mm-hmm.
would then probably advise avoid submitting the SAT score there if the rest of your application is very strong, because that score kind of puts you at a lower end in the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the class. So
Mm-hmm.
you can be very smart now about where you want to submit your score, where you want to apply test optional. There's a
Right.
huge advantage there. But don't be lazy in your thought process. Don't be
Right.
like, oh, because it's test optional, I just don't want to do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Always encourage, do your best, take 2 attempts, if three, if it's needed for you, right? And then see what's the best you can get. And at the end of the day, even if you can submit that score to your fit and reach colleges, you are getting an advantage there. Why would you not take it?
Exactly.
Maybe to the dream college list, you go test optional, but at least
Mm-hmm.
reach and fit, you can submit your score. So I would always advise that even with test optional policies, one should definitely take it. Certain exceptions where I would say a student is really struggling with math at the end of 10th, and the parent comes to me and says, look, my child is just struggling so much in math. It's a subject that scares them so much that SAT just kind of makes them so fearful.
Mm-hmm.
In those situations, I would say, test optional might be a better approach for you. But unless that is your situation,
Mm-hmm.
I think you should definitely go for testing. It's, you know, just do it and then see where you land up. Compare your score to what the percentiles are of the college list that you're looking to apply to, and then take a call on where to submit it, where not to submit it. Unless you really have a fear of certain subject that is there in SAT or ACT, and you really feel that will impact the rest of your academics, that's the only time I would kind of
Mm-hmm.
advise that to you. And you know, even with the EPs, I
Mm-hmm.
think just be clever about why you are taking certain subjects. You need to have a good reason for why you are taking APs, because
Right.
admission officers really tell us that we sometimes think that a student had bio in school and then they did a bio AP, and we didn't really understand why they did that.
Mm-hmm.
So we would really advise our students, and I know you guys do that as well, that it needs to make sense. You know, if you're
Right.
not taking economics in school, perhaps it's a good thing for you to take micro macro economics,
Mm-hmm.
or in a curriculum where you feel that maybe the curriculum is not as strong, so I want to take
Mm-hmm.
an AP to test myself and to make my curriculum more rigorous. That is also a fair way and why fair reason to do it. But officers always need to know that you're doing something different with APs. You're creating diversity in your subject choice as well. You're not just doing the same thing that you're studying in school. There's no point of doing that.
Right. That is very true if we talk about IB curriculum. So if you're taking IB, so
Yeah.
APs are not necessary very will back you up in any manner. But let's say if we talk about a curriculum which is CBSE, for that
Yeah.
it's a huge jump. It's a very huge jump even
Correct.
if you take the same subject if you have it in your 11th or 12th. So that
Yeah.
is how it changes. And also if I talk about the fear that you were speaking, math is a legit fear in students, and I count myself in that. So but I have seen students change that fear into the likeness towards math. Okay, so I'll tell you an incident. So we had the student, he 1 week before his AP calculus BC exam, he scored
Yeah.
1 out of 5, and he ended
Wow.
up scoring 5 out of 5 in his actual
Wow.
AP exam. So that's the turnaround, uh, you
Yeah.
know, turnaround we have seen here. Matlab, even if you talk
Amazing.
about SAT and ACT, the maths that is there is just, the school level math only. There's nothing hard and fast as in
Right.
APs. APs are more college level programs. So it's not something that you've not learned. It is just that if you want to add to your kitty and you want to add to your college application, you have to sort of let go of the fear. Because if you're not studying
Agreed.
it here, you might end up studying in college. And you know to have a fear of that particular subject then is more dangerous than letting go of the fear here. So here this is
Agreed.
a safe environment. So I have actually seen students do that, and I was like, my god, only if I would have had these teachers in my time, I would have done something
Yeah.
good in math. But yeah, I
No,
do
absolutely
believe that.
right. You know, we had a similar case actually last year, and the student ended up at a very good college eventually, but he
Hmm.
uh, dropped math after grade 8. I mean, his fear
Yeah.
of math was so much that from the whole of high school, he just did not have math on his transcript. So he
Correct.
came to us somewhere in, you know, early grade 11 time. And our first thing was, you know, we should try and see if we can add math
Hmm.
back to that transcript through an AP. And when he looked at calculus, he found it too much because he had no background in math in ninth and 10th also.
Right.
But then eventually he ended up doing AP stats and got a 4. And we actually, you know, got feedback from a couple of admission officers as well that that AP stats really did help, because
Hmm.
at least you can show some sort of strength in that subject. And certain subjects, fortunately or unfortunately, are fundamental subjects, at least at the high school level, and math ends up being one of them. And to your point about APs, absolutely. So
Yeah.
the nice thing with, you know, the Indian curriculum is that even if you're doing a lot of things in that, at times the theory part of it in APs can be so different that
Hmm.
it's like even the subject is the same, the learning is very different at the end
Very.
of the day.
Yeah.
That I completely agree, and that's where a CBSE curriculum student can certainly, if they're doing well in school, they feel settled in grade 11, certainly can look to add one or two APs at least to strengthen their rigor in their curriculum as well.
Right.
And even with IB students, I feel I think in IB, I guess the reason to do AAP would be not the rigor, but
Mhm.
it might be diversity. You may want to
Right.
pick a subject that you're not doing in the IB,
Yeah.
and you may want to add a seventh subject there,
Mhm.
which can help you as well. So, yeah, it's just that the reason, of course, the student needs to know what the reason is, not just blindly go and say, my friend is doing the AP, so I'm
Yeah.
also going to do it. Just know
Yeah.
why you're doing it, which subject is the right choice for you, and of course, you guys, Tutela, and of course, counselors like us, we guide those students together, and eventually, that guidance is very important in that domain as well.
Right, right. Absolutely. So, okay, and now we are going to ask you to give us some important tips for our students on
Sure.
college essays. So, college essays I've seen students be scared of. They
Hmm.
are scared of writing about themselves and, going through that lane of actually exploring themselves in the process of actually the
Yeah.
writing the essays. So how do you make sure that a student stands out in their college essays, because that is essentially what everything boils down to when at the end of the application. So,
Yeah.
and I would like you to share some tips as well that the students can take care of while they're writing their essays.
Sure, sure. I think in terms of college essays, especially when we're, looking at the US, they're very self-reflective essays at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And uh, self-reflection is not something we have done a lot in India or we've been taught to do
Yeah,
uh,
very true.
through high school. And, even if you ask someone in their late 20s, early 30s to be like self-reflect on certain areas, it's not an easy thing to do. So when students have to do this in high school times and think about childhood experiences, think
Mm,
about how they work, they operate. Uh, Maybe sometimes they're discovering patterns of their own habits.
mm,
They're understanding themselves better. That's a very important process in the essay writing journey as well. So what we do is we have a bunch of brainstorming exercises with them
mm,
where they'll think about how they kind of what's their own self identity,
mm,
what type of challenges they feel they faced in the past, what types of accomplishments they are the most proud of, so
mm,
just understanding them better. And what it does is, one, it kind of helps the student sort of just think back on a lot of times, and at times students really like they can really enjoy it or they can really hate the exercise because they're like, I'm having to think about so many things that I
yeah,
don't have to think about otherwise. But
yeah,
that's the whole point. That you need to spend that time, you need to kind of dig deeper into your own memory lane in some ways and see what are the experiences that have formed you in some way and shaped you. So it helps them kind of see all those things. And the other thing is, it gives us a lot of things about the student. So we would have hopefully worked with them for a year, 2 years already by the time we're doing essays. But a lot of times students are, they just joined in, they came late. Uh, and it gives us a great opportunity for us to start certain conversations with them. Because if we realize, okay, these are two instances that seem interesting, and we'll be like, okay, let's dig deeper, let's create a conversation around this. So the brainstorming exercises help in a lot of ways to create conversations with the student, and then we figure out more and more stories. Now, the one of the tips that I'll give on college essays is that you can't write about everything. You
right,
just cannot. You can't just capture who you are and what you've done and extracurriculars and this. It can't be about that. It has to be, you have to pick a certain angle, a certain story, something that essay reveals about you to an admission officer, and you have to be happy with what that something is. So one essay about a certain student can talk about their ambitious attitude.
mhm,
Another essay, same student can talk about how they got over a certain fear, which could be, math, for example. We were
mhm,
talking about the fear.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and both those stories can belong to the same student. It's really about you, what you feel is the story that you want to put in front of that admission officer, and what you think portrays you in the best way possible, perhaps. And sometimes that means being vulnerable. Sometimes that means admitting that I was not good at something or I struggled with something, acknowledging that in that essay and talking about the growth journey through that phase as well.
Mhm.
But it's up to you what you want to share. What we always say is you have to be authentic. You can't share someone else's story. You can't make up stories. You have to be authentic with what you are sharing, who you are, what you are made up of. And the other thing that I'll also add as a tip is that very often, sometimes students or parents will come and ask us that, should I not talk about my research here, or should I not talk about my personal project because I spent 2 years doing that? And the answer is, if you feel that has, I mean, if you can capture your journey of the process and what you went through to do it, but if you're just highlighting pieces about your project and you are not present in that essay, there's no point, because the activity section is there to do that. So, admission officers at colleges will always say that. Tell us a story that we can't find in the rest of the application. Don't tell us that you're getting A stars because we can see that on your transcripts.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
spend more time revealing certain things about yourself that cannot be seen anywhere else in the application. And the last part of that is one part where you can tell a story. The rest of it is a few lines. Even the activities that you write, the extracurricular activities, they're limited to 150 characters. You can't write more than that. So you can't write an essay on that exactly
Mhm.
in the application at least. So everything else is brief. A lot of data is there around your standardized testing, around your high school scores, subjects. This is the part where the human touch kind of comes into play as well. So make it about that. Reveal
Mhm.
something, share something that you want to create in that essay you want to share with the admission officer. And I always say this, that a lot of AOs tell us this, that at the end of the essay or at the end of the application, they might write a few lines about a certain student. So I always say that when you read your own essay, what is it that you will write about yourself? What are the few characteristics, few things, and that emotion that's kind of coming up inside you or inside another reader who's read your essay.
Mhm.
So focus on that, what story you're delivering on. And there is an art to it. You want to deliver a story, you don't want to bore the reader. You
Mhm.
want to try and create a recall factor, that if I'm sitting in an admission office today and six application readers are there and we've all done 100 application reviews in a day, I want to be able to kind of be like, oh, that student who wrote about her sister and her relationship with her, that was really interesting. So
Mhm.
if you can create certain factors in that essay which creates a recall, which
Mhm.
creates a memory,
Right.
that's always helpful. uh, and the last part, your essay does not have to be written in the most advanced English writing style ever.
Basically,
Again, the
don't use ChatGPT for your essays.
oh, absolutely,
Oh my God. Yeah,
yeah, has to be
that's
personalized.
right. Right. So I
Chat
actually
GPT
wanted
is
to know your
definitely one.
thoughts on that, because there are so many softwares available that are AI driven, and they can do the job in minutes. You just have to write the instances and your job is done. But then
Yeah,
ultimately, that's not who you want to tell your story. That's not,
exactly.
I like, I shouldn't call it a person, but yeah, that's not right. That's not right. So, is it a
Yeah.
way that colleges can actually make out if the essay has been written with an AI, with the help of an AI, or I think it is frowned upon, right? If in
Yeah, I think there's no way to catch it right now. And in fact, the same question that you're asking me, I asked
yeah.
three admission officers last year. I was meeting them. I think it was just around when Chat GPT kind of became a really
Yeah,
big thing, and it
yeah,
was
yeah,
weeks
yeah.
after that. Sometime around last August, and I asked them the same question, that, you know, are you seeing more students kind of use Chat GPT for essays? And is there a way that universities are putting in systems to kind of catch that as
Hmm.
well? And they said, no, not really. And they said, we don't think it impacts us a lot, because at the end
Mm.
of the day, the student is compromising on their own story. Because Chat GPT can, like you said, it can't personalize something. If
Right.
if today's student is feeling a certain feeling and
Mm.
they have to put that into words, it's not going to come out the same way when you put that into Chat GPT
A
in just
machine.
5 lines, ask
Right.
for it to write an essay for you. So it will give you something and it can go
Mm.
in the Common App. It will read like an okay essay for sure.
Right.
No denying that. But if you really want to look at some of the top schools and you're trying to kind of dig deeper into what is it that I want to reveal to the college, it has to be your story at
Awesome.
the end of it. So even as counselors, our job with essays is to really help you think, to make you curious about what is it you want to write about,
Mm.
what story will I pick for my essay, and then little bit of help can be there on, are the edits right, is the grammar okay, things like that. But we can't think for you, we can't feel for you. Those are
Mm.
your emotions, that's your journey, and it has to come out in that manner.
Right, right. And if we talk about the influence of social media that you know the current generation has on them, is there a way that there are multiple thoughts when we think about social media? There are positive and there are negatives, right? So, is
So
there a way that the social media influence or the use of social media can be taken positively towards their application process in a way?
yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, there's both positives and negatives as well. A lot of students use social media to build their own sort of presence at times. So
Brand,
when
yeah.
they're applying to college, they're putting in their Insta handles,
Yeah.
and at times we've had students who've done their own projects. So
Mm.
someone who's done an independent project of creating awareness on something, they had an Instagram page on that
Mm.
being done. So you can, when you're working on projects, you can certainly create a lot of Insta pages and do a lot of work on that as well.
Mhm.
And that can certainly go into the application as well in the additional information section. So it can be used for a digital presence in the right
Mhm.
way. Uh, at the same time, I would say also be mindful of social media at times from a negative perspective, that I personally feel it can sometimes add and create pressure that does not exist.
Mm.
I'd written this blog, I think, couple of years back about this, how sometimes you're getting into a certain college and you're happy about it, but then you realize someone from your school got into even a better college and stuff, and it starts to make you feel that, did I not achieve what was supposed to achieve?
Right.
And very often you speak to those students and they are at those respective universities 6 months, 8 months later, they're extremely happy, they're having a gala time, they're like, I'm in the
Mm.
right place, I'm doing all the right classes, I'm meeting all the right people. But when you're going through the process, sometimes getting accepted and getting rejected can mean such big
No.
things,
Right.
and social media can sometimes play a huge role there. So just
Right.
be mindful of, it's benefits as well, and it's also the
Yeah.
downside of it. But I would just say to students that find ways on how you can kind of use social media for yourself in the right way, and you consume social media, don't let it consume you
Right.
you know
Absolutely right. And at the end of the day, your application and the college that you land is very personalized. So,
Absolutely.
not it's not that it's if it's an Ivy League, it is for everybody. It is not for everybody. And
Correct.
not every college is for everybody. You have to pick your fights, and just because somebody got there doesn't mean that you would have liked that. It is at the end of the day, as I said, it's a personal thing. So yeah,
Yes.
I think, yeah, with
I
that
agree.
question, we came to the end of this podcast. Thank you so much, Abhinav. I think you answered all the question very nicely, and I think all the listeners would have loved all the information that you imparted. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Artika. Thanks for the opportunity as well. And have a great day. Thank
You
you.
too. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. And to all the listeners, if you like this podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.